I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're talking about the Vampiro Trilogy. It is written by medical professional Dr. Don Hill. He delves into the world of fiction with a thrilling narrative about human vampirism, moral dilemmas, and the pursuit of justice. It is set against the backdrop of New Mexico's Lower Rio Grande, and the trilogy follows the experiences of Lorena Pastor, a young curandera, if I'm saying that correctly, and Brewster, a medical student, as they navigate the dangerous and mysterious world of vampires. We're delighted to have the doctor in the spotlight today. Thank the folks at Authors Tranquility Press for putting him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel. Doctor, thanks so much for being our guest today.
Well, thank you very much. It's good to be here. Hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in and listening to this tale.
Absolutely, and it's quite a tale you have spun with the story of Lorena and Brewster and the vampires and all of that. Tell us, what was your inspiration?
Well, to be frank with you, I'm really not a big fan of the science fiction horror genre. I was kind of talked into this by a friend of mine who helped co-write the book, Tom Cavaretta. Tom was a pharmaceutical executive, and he had read my first trilogy called DNR, Do Not Resuscitate, which is a dark story about a medical student whose life goes off the rails. He becomes dehumanized to the point that he's able to engineer the murder of a patient in the hospital who happened to be a serial killer. He'd been sent from the prison system to the hospital for a medical illness. And the house staff and the medical students get together and they plot his demise. And that story may or may not be based on true events. We'll just leave it at that.
Well, that sounds like a fantastic story in and of itself, for sure.
Well, it's a dark story, and people have read it and feel very uncomfortable reading it, and that was the whole point.
Right.
But Tom read the story, and he said, I got this idea, Don. I want to bounce it off of you. I've always wanted to do a story about vampirism. I thought, oh my God, no, Tom, this is so worn out. I'm not looking forward to doing anything about some man who sells his soul to the devil for some earthly commodity. I'm not interested at all. I said, no. He says, Don, I got a better idea. What I want to do is to see if you can help me from your expertise as a hematologist to portray human vampirism as a potentially real illness based upon a virus that could be transmitted horizontally through the community, causing a pandemic. And I thought about it for a little while, and I thought, well, if the humble bat could perhaps, function at the level of a vampire, perhaps a higher primate could do it also. So we kicked around some ideas, and I think we came up with a fairly plausible concept that perhaps human vampirism would be possible based on the transmission of an RNA virus that causes a dedifferentiation at a cellular level, where human beings who are infected, are no longer able to make their own red cells, and they're required to ingest hemoglobin from an alternate source, another living being. And along with this, we incorporated some Spanish lore about the huevo limpia tradition, where an egg is utilized to remove evil spirits from somebody in a quasi-religious ceremony. And the idea is that the virus lives in a dormant phase in eggs of chickens, and that it can sometimes be transmitted to humans by inadvertently consuming an egg that's been contaminated with the virus. So we put the first two stories together, and it sounded pretty interesting, and decided, well, let's see if we can wrap this up with a a third edition, a third volume, as it were. But sadly, 2 years ago, when Tom and I started to write and collaborate on the third edition of this trilogy, Tom became acutely ill, and he died unexpectedly. He died in March 2 years ago, and very sad. This was during the start of the COVID outbreak. Now, Tom wasn't like me at all. Tom was thin. He was 5 years younger. He was athletic. He's the kind of guy that would jump on his bicycle and tell his wife, "Hey, Marcy, I'm going to ride to Canada today. I'll be back, in a couple hours." That kind of crazy stuff like that. He was a long distance athletic competition, and the guy was buff, didn't have any body fat, didn't smoke or drink, and he was a direct antithesis to my body habitus. I'm a little overweight. I haven't exercised in a long time. I'm awfully busy at work as a physician, and here the healthiest member of this writing team gets sick and dies suddenly. And I was discouraged for a while, but I decided I got to get off my duff and finish this. And I finished the book December a couple of years ago, and we now put it out as a trilogy. So, and even though Tom did not write any of the third volume, the third installment, I was obligated to include him as a co-author, because without him, I wouldn't have gotten into this genre at all. And so that's how this story came about.
It was kind of prescient of you guys on many levels, but particularly the level of the vampirism spreading via a pandemic, because this was written before the pandemic.
It absolutely was. It was really uncanny. And when this all fell into place, Tom and I said, "Well, what's happening here? This is where art is superseding reality." And there was some concern that the whole COVID virus may have been an example of zoonosis, which is the medical term for an infection that dwells in a lower life form, can infect human beings, and that may indeed have been the case in this particular pandemic that we've just all survived. So we were just in the right place at the right time, and had this crazy idea that seemed to mesh historical events. I have no explanation for it, though.
Right. Well, I think it's interesting the fact that you're not only the author of this book, you're also kind of the technical advisor to it as well, because all of the science makes sense, and that's how you really pull the viewer in.
Well, I certainly hope that's the case. We wanted to present something that was scientifically plausible, and I bounced my ideas off with other people and said, this could possibly happen. So I thought we were on the right track.
Tell me a little bit about vampirism. Did you have to research it? Is there an oral tradition to vampirism?
What's really peculiar is that the mythology of vampirism is transcultural. The ancient Mesoamericans, including the Aztec and the Maya, they believed that there was such a thing. In fact, they would bury their dead in what was called a cenote, a big open hole in the ground, and would put out what's called the Colima dog, which is to guard the hole, to make sure that what they put in it would not come back to life and prey upon the villagers. And the classic quote Bram Stoker unquote Dracula, of course, comes from Eastern Europe, from the Romania area, and Vlad Tepes, the brutal Romanian ruler, was the inspiration for Bram Stoker's original work of fiction, Dracula. but actually the tradition of creatures that escape the bonds of death and roam the countryside and prey on other human beings. That predated the Vlad Tepes character by centuries, if not thousands of years ago or more. And it's also a tradition amongst Asia in the Chinese population. They believe in creatures that can come back to the dead from the dead and prey upon human beings. Why is this such a universal thought amongst different cultures that weren't connected in any way? It's hard to explain, unless perhaps there may be some kind of element of truth to it. Why would such a dark phenomenon as a tradition exist in multiple cultures who had no contact with each other? It's inexplainable.
Yeah, it is kind of a haunting question for sure. Is there a connection as well to the lower Rio Grande Valley?
Well, we decided to base the story in New Mexico totally on the huevo limpia ceremony of using an egg to try and cleanse a person who is thought to be possessed by evil forces. The limpia ceremony dictates that once the egg is passed over a body or a person who's thought to be possessed by demonic forces, that under no circumstances should one eat the egg. It's buried in the backyard of a person's house in a specific ceremony. And since we had this idea that perhaps this was a virus that existed and transmitted from other lower life forms, it made sense to try and incorporate the huevo limpia ceremony into the vampire tale that we were weaving. And I think we did a pretty good job in combining something that is scientifically plausible with ethnic tradition, which meshed, I think, quite nicely in the story. And that's why we utilized the southwestern part of the United States, where curanderas or faith healers exist, and where the ceremony of cleansing souls, utilizing an egg in a quasi-religious ceremony, is well founded.
Absolutely. And that brings us to Lorena Pastor, your heroine in the story. She's a curandera, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Tell us a little bit about developing her as a character and why you decided to build the story around her.
Well, for a long time, there's been criticism of our Western society that we do not appreciate the contributions that women make to the function of society. Mm-hmm. We thought, well, why don't we make the main protagonist in this story a woman? And it fell into a place that we decided to use a young woman in her early 30s to carry the banner. But in the story, the characters that we introduce, they evolve or they devolve along the way. Life changes people, and sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. And Lorena is a character who starts to take on a dark ambiance halfway through the story, when she believes, either rightly or wrongly, that she's the heir to the throne of the lost Maya culture, and which drives her down into the Yucatan Peninsula, where she proclaims to the remnants of the Maya people who are scattered amongst the forest that she is their leader. And she gets involved in some nefarious activity with dealings with the drug cartel and runs afoul of their favor. And that adds drama and incorporates, again, historical facts that currently one of the greatest threats to us as a country is the drug cartels that are south of the border that seem to have free access to our country now, and killing Americans by tens of thousands with the introduction of contaminated fentanyl. And we don't seem to have the power to stop it. And so Lorena, she starts out as a decent person with goals of that are actually quite noble, to care for the family that's under her charge. And throughout the story, she becomes a darker and more malevolent character.
Yeah. Also in your book, you write about the victims of violent crimes coming together for vigilantism. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, this probably is a theme that was carried over from the DNR trilogy, my first work of fiction, which is deeply embedded in the concept of vigilantism. When societies break down and concepts of right and wrong become blurry, and when there does not appear to be justice for criminal activity and for malevolent and evil behavior, that is the rise, that causes the rise of vigilante activity in any society. And this concept was carried over from DNR into the Vampiro series, in that injustice is done all the time, and those that commit acts of evil in a frustrating manner appear to thrive, and those that appear to be trying to toe the line and to live their lives as decent human beings are the ones that get hit on from a meteor from outer space, and bad things happen to them. So I think the incorporation of the element of vigilante activity was a bit cathartic for myself as a writer, and also for hopefully the reader, and for those who understand how the world really works.
Do you feel like, particularly now in this era where crime seems to go unchecked, where prosecutors allow criminals to leave without being held on bail, that there's going to be a resurgence of popular culture phenomenons such as Dirty Harry or your book, where people kind of turn to vigilantism, at least in a popular culture form, as an outlet?
I would not be surprised at all, to be frank. I kind of had that idea in the back of my head when I decided to use as a sub-theme to this work of fiction a component of vigilante activity. I know, as it was cathartic for me to write it, that others would probably get some sense of satisfaction that, at least at a fictional level, sometimes right prevails.
Absolutely. Well, it seems like we were in a similar time in the 70s and early 80s where crime was out of control. So that's what made Clint Eastwood a star. Go ahead, make my day, because people were so sick and tired of the crime having no consequences. Brewster also...
Precisely. And see, as human beings, it's often said that if we don't understand history and don't appreciate it, it's repeated.
Exactly.
So I encounter folks who have no concept of what we are as a nation or what we've been through, about the sins that we committed in the past, but how we are still basically a noble people who, by and large, try to do the right thing. I think that's lost on a lot of people in this more modern generation, and they don't understand that things cycle and they repeat themselves because times change, but human beings, we do not.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it's also such a phenomenon. People live through it. You remember what New York City was like before Giuliani was mayor. It was a mess.
Absolutely.
He came around and made it the safest city in America. It became like Disney World. And now it's a mess again because he followed
and
certain
Giuliani
principles
was
that are no longer
ultimately
followed.
vilified for his efforts.
Exactly. And vilified and perhaps prosecuted for his efforts, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's a crazy upside down world. And I think that's what's appealing to your books is the fact that it takes a look at a world gone out of control and the moral dilemmas that are involved there as well. In fact, Brewster is kind of on a moral journey throughout the trilogy, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. The character Brewster is a medical student. Actually, he's a resident at the time that he appears in the Vampiro Trilogy, and this is a fellow who has his own demons. He has moral ambiguity. He's been through tough times, and he tries to compartmentalize the tragedies that he's experienced in his own life by securing it in an emotional jar with a lid screwed down tight, and that's clarified in some of his conversations with his other colleagues that he had a fiance that had died a tragic death from his own personal malfeasance of not paying attention to what was going on with her medical health, and he relays that the best way to deal with a tragedy or some unfortunate event in his life is just to not deal with it at all. It's close the door and move on as if it never happened.
Another intriguing character is Navajo scientist Dr. Zachary Hawk. Tell us a little bit about his character development and why you choose to write about him.
Dr. Hawk was a character introduced in the third and final installment of the trilogy. And this is an homage to the American natives, of course, that a main cultural force in New Mexico. And I thought it would only be appropriate to bring in American native, a first American, into the storyline. And his character was based upon a fellow that I knew years ago, some 30 years ago, when I actually was doing my residency and fellowship training at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. I met a fellow who was a research scientist who was 30 years old about at the time, so roughly my age. And he was an interesting character with an interesting life. And he inspired me. This individual inspired me to model my final character on Dr. Hawk. Mm-hmm. Now, Professor Hawk also has his dark side. He's portrayed as a fellow who's skirted ethical behavior on occasion. It's related in the story that he had once stolen an artifact at a archaeological dig, and he has his own motives that are egotistically based on what he wants out of life and what he wants to achieve. But he becomes a pivotal character when he and Lorena Pastor encounter each other, and their stories intertwined. And Hawk escapes the long arm of the law by going down to Mexico to escape justice here in this country for a misdeed he was involved with. And that's when his life intertwines with the other main protagonists in the story.
Fascinating. I like it. I like that you use literal names for your characters. Pastor is a scientist and a healer. Hawk is literally a hawk.
Of course.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Have you visualized this?
And if people think about it, say, oh, okay, I understand where that name came from. It doesn't take a lot of thought, but then also it clicks on people saying, oh, I see what he's doing. Yeah.
Exactly. No, it works, and I like it. It's not in your face. It's subtle, and that always works. You don't want anything to beat you over the head with it, but I liked it a lot. Tell me, have you visualized this series of books as a series of TV shows or films?
Well, I certainly hope so. I'd like to see if I could bring this to fruition. I am currently acting as a producer for 3 mini movies in the 15-minute range on the DNR series. And oh my goodness, I can't lie. This is costing me an absolute fortune, but I feel compelled to do it. And I have a couple of more installments to pay, and then I think they'll be ready to move forward in producing the DNR mini movies. And once that's done, I will try and afford the Vampiro Trilogy the same attention and to give it the same notice that it deserves. And so these mini movies, of course, will be shown at film festivals and the like, and hopefully it will attract the attention of a major production company or producer or director to have interest in the project and maybe take it on as a full-blown motion picture or a series or a television event. So that remains to be seen, but that's certainly my goal.
Yeah, well, it's an attainable goal, I think, because the books of the Vampiro Trilogy are very fascinating, very real. And I think they can go head to head with any vampire series out there.
Well, thank you. That's kind of you to say.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Who would you cast? Let's say this book winds up in a top producer or director's hands and they want to make it a film, and they don't need you to produce your own short. They just want to go ahead and make a series. Who would play Dr. Lorena Pastor or Lorena Pastor?
Oh, wow. It would need to be an Hispanic actress in her early 30s.
Yeah.
My thought about the whole thing in who would be cast as characters in this project, if this does indeed come to fruition, is to utilize relatively unknown and upcoming individuals.
Yeah.
There's lots of people in the movie industry and on TV that don't make anything at all for their efforts. They're living on a shoestring, budget, and only 1% of people that are consider themselves thespians or actors or actresses. That's a struggle. It's a calling for them to pursue this art, and I admire them that they're willing to sacrifice comfort and safety and a round the clock, well-paying job that offers them security for something that's nebulous and it might not ever happen. So whoever is cast, and I probably won't have any saying in casting at all, I would like to use novel actors and actresses that have not made it, and maybe this will be a break for them.
I think that's great. It also kind of captures the audience's imagination. If you cast a Penelope Cruz or Jennifer Lopez, let's say, everybody has these preconceived notions about that person. But if you cast an unknown actor, yet a talented actor, I think you'd probably get your best result. To start out reading the Vampiro Trilogy, start with Volume 1. It is called The Nightcrawler Protocol. That's all you need to get started, because it'll suck you in quite literally and figuratively, and you will long to read volumes 2 and 3 as well. They're fantastic works. They are works rooted in legend, mythology, realism, actuality, and science. And it's a terrific combination, a compelling combination. Dr. Don Hill, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
I enjoyed chatting with you, and I hope the listeners will find the subject matter intriguing. Thank you very much.
I think they will. It's been a fascinating conversation, so I appreciate your time. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.